All right, we're gonna get started. I love having an office on the top floor, but when you forget something up there, it requires you to go up 3 flights of stairs, and I'm out of breath. Okay. Anyway, my name is Marty Ackett, and I'm the Adult Programming Coordinator for Peter White Public Library. And I want to welcome you tonight to Andrew and Dennis's a reading. But I'm going to make you aware of a few things that are coming up later this week and month and next month here at Peter White. I'm out of breath. On Friday, we're going to be doing our global cinema. Yes, I know the Fresh Coast Film Festival is going on, but we also have the global cinema, which is going to be going on upstairs in the Shiras room. And we are showing Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. So, if you've never seen that, it's an amazing movie. Won the Oscar for Best International Film Feature 6 or 7 years ago, I think. It's a really incredible experience. I recommend everybody come. And then next Monday night, this is our last event as part of Banned Books Week, Banned Books Month here at the library. We are hosting a virtual reading by the writer Alex Gino, whose book Melissa has landed on the Banned Books list since it was published in 2015. So Alex is going to be here virtually. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. It's going to be moderated, so you can submit those questions, and then I will pose those questions to Alex. So that's going to happen on Monday, 7 p.m. right here in the community room. Let's see. Blues Day Tuesday, next Tuesday, and the band is going to be Harp, Heart, and Bones. I know people like to know that, so Harp, Heart, and Bones is here next Tuesday at 7 p.m. right here in the community room. Tyler Tischler is going to be doing a presentation from his recently published Gothic Grooms and Spectre Brides. It's all about Gothic horror. So in keeping with our spooky month theme here as well. And then next week, Friday, here in the community room, we're going to be showing the recent film adaptation of Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, Judy Blume's book. So lots of great things coming up. And then if you are a horror movie fan, next Saturday, the 28th, we have the Carnival of Horrors, and that is a 3 horror films that we're going to be showing during the day here in the community room. There's going to be a costume contest. I'm going to be dressing up. I'm not telling you what I'm dressing up as, but I'll be here. And there's going to be popcorn. There's going to be all kinds of treats. And also a horror movie trivia. So if you are a horror movie fan, show up and you can win some prizes. So next month we have some great stuff coming up as well. All of this information is in these flyers back there on the desk. So if you want to pick them up and to find out and keep abreast of what's happening here at the library for adult programming. So it is my honor to introduce our 2 speakers, our 2 poets for tonight. And the first is going to be Andrew Collard. I said that right? Collard? All right. So I just have a few quotes here that I really loved I've read the book. It's beautiful. I've read it like 3 or 4 months ago, I swear. But it's a gorgeous book. But I'll tell you a little bit about Andrew. Andrew is the author of Sprawl, which won the Hollis Summers Poetry Prize. His poems have appeared in Plowshares, Agni, Best New Poets, and elsewhere. He currently lives in Grand Rapids, where he teaches at Grand Valley State University and edits poetry for Third Coast Magazine. And I'm just going to read you, I love some of these quotes. So this is from Andrew, I actually read interviews that you gave too. So Andrew says, "My memory is pretty famously untrustworthy." I think everybody's is, so, which I think gives me a certain advantage in admitting that memory in general is pretty untrustworthy thing. I tend to write from impressions rather than facts, and am very interested in the private mythologies that everyday places like to spawn. A particular parking lot or room or structure can become very important to me, and I'm interested in trying to capture that private importance in a way that makes sense to other people. And this is a quote from Jennifer Kwan Dobbs, who was the final judge for the Hollis Summers Poetry Prize. And she said, I admired the poet's deeply felt intelligence, alert to the way the pieces move. The manuscript was an experience that gripped me from the beginning, and I can second that because I read this in one sitting. Gorgeous poetry, and my family is from Detroit, so brought back some nostalgia as well as I was reading it. So please welcome to Peter White Public Library, Andrew Collard.
Hi. Everybody hear me like this? Coming through? Okay, thank you. Sometimes I'm always like, I'm down here and then trying to figure it out. Yeah, this is a book about the Detroit area, sprawl. I grew up in the area. I lived all over that area, so it's a very sort of firmly planted book in that way. But I think it's probably a recognizable sort of scenario in that it's the city on top of city on top of city. And obviously that's part of where the title comes from. This is one of the first poems in the book, which is called Perpetual Motion, which is someone once described as an autobiography in cars, which I think we all have. I like that a lot. If you start thinking of all of the cars that you've been in or owned or what have you over the years, the stories just tend to start popping up. So I'd like to hear your version of this poem probably at some point. Perpetual Motion. I drove, the Focus leapt. I slept inside a Civic for 4 nights at a rest stop. East of Harper, my whole existence packed into the trunk. I rode like a witness or misplaced luggage. I threw up in the cabin of a duct-taped Cavalier, Crown Vic, Astrovan, Beetle. Blame it on the road noise or the radio. Smart-ass friends who put me quick at ease. I shouted out the lyrics of the MC5 from the back seat of a stranger's Chrysler, carried through the tributaries of the night toward what? A bedroom's near total stillness, stray headlights through the blinds, solitude. When I wake to stillness, think of stillness, ambushed by how tenuous a thing it is to breathe, listening as my neighbor's lamp or glass bursts against our shared wall. I think of where the crystal stillness leads and whisper, I don't want to go. I circle back, adrift in an age of endless leaving, as if home were not extraordinary. I called shotgun, bumped a cyclist, watched my sister swigging whiskey in her Cadillac as she slurred unprompted questions to the sky, the trees, the darkened houses. Ask me where the day began, and I'll tell you everywhere or nowhere how I steered an orphan friend's Kia up and down M3 from Detroit into the sticks until he quieted, then slouched from his grieving and into sleep, while beside the car the ad-ridden fixtures of the strip malls and the churches blurred into a path of light. This next one's a poem out of childhood in a way. I was kind of fascinated by the sound of cicadas growing up, the buzz of the cicada. Somehow I didn't know what first of all, I didn't know what they were, but somehow I got it in my head that it was like the sound of far off construction, something like that. So this is kind of out of that experience, trying to capture the hum of the cicada. Cicada song. Oh, the drag days, the vertigo of earth, the sap, the night, the cruelty of jays, the mantises, the years I passed in darkness to elude them, winters languishing above my head. Oh, how many lives behind me now, the carapace, the bumbling climb, the crater, the holes we leave, the city of tubers, subterranean, the sickened leaves, the helicopters. Oh, forgotten weeks my father sang above the world of men, trimmed branches, power cables, sandbox song, descending to the empires of brick and mortar, the side yard, the hose, the child demanding gulps, the water puddling in the grass around the halo of his muddy shoe. Oh, harmony, the saw mower symphony of crickets, the percussive thudding, excavator, dump truck, traffic, whispering of the freeway, love. Oh, can you hear me? I am calling you between the branches, the primordial maple, the wellspring bark, the arm I sprang from. Oh, the fall, the sudden stop, the cushion of the world beneath me. Oh, the burrow and the boy who keeps watch from his window. Oh, those years the whole earth held me, the crusted husk, the body I discarded, the frame I couldn't recognize still clinging to the rotting deck, the old life crouched and pleading to remain erect, to mother me. Oh, the blanket I would draw over the houses, the ants, the daddy longlegs wobbling in the dew, the rain, the hose, the shouting children. Oh, to tuck them in, my love. Oh, can you hear me? Heavy magic of the wing, the sap, the chorus of the trees, the wild vibration, echo chamber of my chest, the notes dispatched into the heat, the rushing water, siren box fan, static of the radio, the womb, my love, the space between the trees, the sky that cries, ascend, ascend, and all to find you, all to know I won't return. All to find out the cicada song is a love song. There's a series of poems running through the book and running through outside the book called Autotopia, which is kind of a pet name I've bestowed on the area and sort of what drives it. So this is the first Autotopia poem, which is for Sterling Heights, Michigan. That's about 10 miles north of the city, something like that. Autotopia. No longer the mail carriers, the utility poles dispatching their charges to your every extremity, bearing the weight of the signals that allow for your ascent. No longer the skeleton built of back roads and freeways, cutting acres of oak in the odd swamp, the neighborhoods with their asphalt grids. Oh, Autotopia, what will you bleed once the wind becomes uncivil and the oil runs out? Will you spit in the face of the always exploding sun? Who will be left then to unwrap the soft hands of broadcast from the foreheads of your million children as they roll across the land, migrating daily to their offices among the sky, to factories assembling cars or newspapers, and then home that their dwellings might somehow bless the earth entrenched? Aren't they more like weather than a garden? Aren't they more like wind than what the wind blows over? I'm stumbling through the arboretum after dark, mosquitoes at my clavicles, or breathing strangely at the wheel as train lights flash and the gates jerk down and up and down, or I'm scouring the clouded night sky from my bedroom window for the source of whatever disturbance has awakened me at 3 a.m., when suddenly my forgotten impulse to leave heaves through me like nausea or too much light. Oh, how I wish someone would look at me the way you do the yards of new grass or chimney caps, as though I were some loot to be stolen, that I might sing for them alone, a song to carry through your ecosystem of lust and smog. If I am where the dead things go, I insist you send down one among your cast-out gods to recover me, some Orpheus or other, whose fingers might compel me out into the open evening, chasing down the notes he's rung. There are a fair number of poems in this book that are written at fast food places or waiting for them. I start to wonder why they show up and what why I would grow so fond of such a place. But it's the places where I can afford to be. That's part of it. This is called After News of a Border Shutdown, I Venture Out for Fries. Can I interest anyone in the newspaper of my spirit? Feathers today, it's mostly feathers. Once again, these field reports from the interior have failed to document the wildlife rattling around in me, goings-on lost to the usual grammars of a Monday crowded with anxious thoughts. Nevertheless, as the drive-through line at Wendy's winds out from the parking lot and drivers mug to jockey for position, as fringe groups graffiti their invective across the internet, and the border we once disregarded like robins do, day-tripping in our family van, is closed, I riff towards some clause that might disrupt this arrangement the world seems to be stranded by mid-performance, grounding us inside our separate plots beneath the signal. If to love someone is to devote to them my full attention, I am afraid that I am losing the ability to love. If I flinch before the storm, bartering like a zealot at the steering wheel as rain begins to pummel bystanders, I am no more likely to arrive at my intended destination still intact. Perhaps it is you, Neil Young, disembodied and streaming through the speaker of my Ford, who will accept my confession. My mother lived in America for 20 years before she decided to become a citizen, and when she did, I skipped the ceremony, my distaste for posturing, even as a teen, too terrible to swallow. I think now, beneath the black light of a war that wouldn't end, what I mistook for flag-waving in the federal courthouse was for her an act of self-defense, in media res, the moment when she felt most threatened, reciting to the judge his own second-hand pledge as the landscape inside her dimmed into memory and the birds there, one by one, began to lose their names. Neil Young is somewhat of a recurring character in this book, which is also a matter of just what's around, I think. But this is called Church Can Be a Word for Anywhere, which is another car poem, actually. This is about a dear old Honda Civic that kicked it before its time. Lost neighborhood, lost Civic. Neil Young. We'll see. Church can be a word for anywhere, an alley you skipped work to smoke in, a public fountain you sat before, begging yourself to change, or any of the innumerable landscapes in whose grasp you were opened, made helpless by new light. And love, if these moments are enough to bless a space so unremarkable as the room where I was born, before an audience of technicians and fluorescents, or the location where I will one day cease to exist, then why not the front seat of the Honda Civic I fell into every morning, near oblivious to the sun's ambush of Orion, to the layer of dust coating the dash like a light snow, the cup holders filled with portraits of politicians etched in copper, and the caked sugar of jostled cokes? Why not the deep blue frame, the cracked windshield I returned to after long days informing patients of their rights, families desperate for relief or diagnosis or for leaving? The thumb-worn steering wheel I returned to again after dark, as though for an hour of prayer, to hit the Tubby's drive-thru or CVS for aloe, to circle the block awash in my own unspeakable and solemn feelings amid the thudding of purple rain or germ-free adolescence, burning scraps of the past to get from here to here until the days stretched into a single day and transmission finally gave out on a block riddled with unretrieved junk mail jutting out of boxes, with upended sidewalks, spoiled food, and rumors of human bodies. I must return again to the scent of air conditioning fluid as it slowly leaks into the cabin, to the creak of brake pads worn too thin, to the wheels passed down like an apology back before the state of constant crisis found me, before I stopped calling it a crisis. This time, come with me. We'll tour the ruin, even if the motor sounds like shit or takes a couple tries to fire. See? Here is the food counter where Neil Young once jotted lyrics on a napkin stranded by a broken van. Here is the overpass we idled by while the storm engulfed it with debris. Here is the house we thought was ours to lose. Here is the garden. How we lost it is nothing new. The Neil Young song is The Old Laughing Lady, if anybody's wondering. This one also features fast food sort of place in it. A place called the Telway, all over the Detroit area and the Midwest more generally. There used to be lots of little slider windows, and this was one of them. Some of them were white towers, some of them were greens, I think, various names. There's one that's still there that I used to frequent when I lived in Madison Heights, which is the Telway. Telway Lament. 1. And then one morning, just before the sunlight turns to bees at my bedroom window, I will see it through fog, a half-smoked cigarette flattened on concrete or the rippling of a cruddy puddle. Some image I will chew through afternoon until the shadow burgeoning above me dissipates like an acquittal. And I'll remember then how home is gathered and walk a while before I grow too frail and start to eat myself away, the way a memory gets whittled to a single detail and nothing more. The way each too bright morning has become this single too bright morning, the same old brand new day my mind's been peddling for months. And every evening taxed by lonesomeness becomes another reason I should leave. Some nights I want nothing more than to insert this bad year in the middle of some better era, to go back somewhere I will know myself as settled. I can't be caught up in another movie, can't bring myself to cook or sleep, and so I pull my boots on and take a drive, waste gas, wear the paint-chipped body out, until the embers snuff, or until the light burns low enough it goes unnoticed in the dark. 2. In what place isn't meant for passing through, I think, the smell of grilled onions radiating above the bar. Gray-haired men line up on stools like sunflowers droop in too hot August, shooting shit as if they'd grown here, and in truth they have, congregating 3 nights every week since the 1980s. They come to be with people, and they come to be alone, each enduring memories of some private golden age they hope to resurrect, if only for a few hours, as each fry, slider, and chocolate shake does its mouth-to-mouth on whatever cherished moment the chemicals and lightning in their minds half conjure. This is what I mean when I tell you I remember, a kind of faith in an abandoned language, a way the landscape has of naming me, the way I once mistook a marigold, an aster, and a black-eyed Susan for a garden roadside, when my bedroom ceiling bares its blunted teeth past midnight. The only miracle I know is isolation. A man in a tiger's cap squints to recognize me standing at the glass door, but I don't live here anymore and never learned to say goodbye, like a regiment that goes on fighting days after the war is lost. Some nights relief is like a squad car stumbling on a tipsy driver. Some nights I drive home on empty and fall to bed, faceless as a scratched LP, needle skipping, carrying the probing glances of the passers-by into my sleep, as though the contours of my body had forgotten me, the way faith's fortitude is drawn from disavowal of the mystery it sprang from. 3. Call it faith, call it garden, call it home if you want to, call it nothing, to hunger, to return, and to be filled. Perhaps I lie in bed all morning and watch a common spider hidden badly against the chipped paint above me, no web to speak of. How long has it been there? Until my hunger pushes me to stand, and sensing movement, the spider flees. Perhaps my son wakes early, asks for yogurt, clapping his hand against his chest, the sign for please, and I carry him toward the fridge. Across town, a man dressed in frayed jeans tells the grill cook he just made $20 raking leaves and that he feels rich as a senator, carrying his coffee out into the wind. To engage, to surrender, and what more he thinks could earthlings want? Sliders, caffeine, fries at any hour of the day. This is another poem out of childhood, which takes place during what is a historical event. This takes place during the Detroit newspaper strike of the 90s. which was the first time I'd seen sort of an action like that. Commute. Shrove Tuesday, I watched them through the windshield of my mother's Astro van, kneading palms together before the plant on Metro Parkway in order to incite the necessary heat to lift morale. Such commotion I had yet to witness, except perhaps inside a church, as if a parade had broken out, but slowly lost its impulse in the dark hours of the morning, the cold air rendering each breath as an escape. I was reading X-Men then, or at least absorbing panels. I recognized the heavy coats, the shouts, the cavalcade of strangers massed in service to a conflict that I couldn't grasp. Some marched, hand-stapled posters raised toward the avenue, "Honk if you're with us," at 7 a.m. Others gathered around the barrels rife with fire inherited from other days. "We are not safe," they seemed to say. "You are not safe," as though my mother's box of glass and steel built for hurtling was all that held me, those few inch-thin layers of wrought earth. And then the stoplight changed, and oof, the congregation vanished in the side view mirror, and pow, my mother scared up the city's final box of punchki, and zap, the ancient line of school buses parted. In the end, I wasn't even late for class. Bleary-eyed, the picket would continue deep into tomorrow's ashes, and for another year beyond, its lingering questions cast off to the courts, all distantly removed from those sub-freezing interludes, the bodies that were then so tangible. "We are still here," they assured us from the roadside, from the fading stickers on our mailboxes and our parents' bumpers. I am still here, navigating signals and crumbling infrastructure, bracing for another year's impression of dire weather from someone else's Dodge. Dear neighbor, we are not safe. Honk if you're with us. All right. This is another Autotopia poem, which is for the city itself, Detroit, Michigan. Today I descend the stairs of the old parking garage as though I'm under anesthetic, fragments of the past washing over me until I am unable to name the artifice of your piazzas, to call your smokestacks out as noise. These gaps in memory impose on my attention the way your various structures do on the sprawl of the landscape as your children leap between them in their F-150s, Chevy vans, and discontinued Buicks, as the buses and elevated train cars offload bodies in exchange for other bodies. Even so, I remember the gas station up the avenue selling what passes for New York-style pizza, spinning behind a pane of glass, and the intersection it took a full 10 minutes to navigate on foot. How I was so sure then of my father's command over the crowded street, I never questioned, never thought in all the world we could be lost. We were going to the same place all those grim travelers out along Jefferson were going, the place they disappeared to, the traffic shooting west toward the harbor terminal, with its warehouse painted a startling blue, the dock where the ferries loaded passengers bound for Boblo, and your cargo ships departed filled with steel coils, wire, and slabs destined for auto plants. We were going where the years went as we watched entire decades dissipate up and down these streets we walked hand in hand, the same place we're still going, in all the world no day like this. And this is the last poem in the book. Thank you again, Marty, for having us out here. Thanks everybody else for being here too. I've been having a heavy-hearted stretch, as many are, and so I love having poetry as a sort of thing to bring us together. If there's one thing this book has taught me, I'm leaning into the microphone again. If there's one thing this book has taught me, I think it's that in the plural, we can make things happen, if that's fair to say. And that's kind of what this poem is about. It's also about a not great apartment that me and my kiddo were living in. We had to get out of there. Dear leasing office, dear oil slick. Dear leasing office, dear oil slick, I did not come to curse this plot of earth, brickwork bounce house stricken with resting bitch face, or its Pandora's box of kid feet continually thundering back and forth on the fourth floor. Dear long-emptied bird feeder, ghost, and broken screen, this season's token cliffhanger requires I pack my things and disperse into a cold front of engine rips and oh shit brake whales to let the asphalt eat my tires off mile by mile. Where will I live now with my heart made of shingles, my faulty memory and minivan, trunks stuffed with shoes as I flounder toward home like a tune pitched above my hearing? Dear weather vane, white pine, dear quick-fix drywall, heavy with questions, in memory of complete strangers knocking after midnight to inquire after a Wi-Fi password, or a light, or the whereabouts of a missing spouse, I have returned to give this king-size calendar I spilled my days against one last blessing before I go. Let vines reach their fingers across your every fence, ascending the utility poles and power cables. Let the neighbor's wind chime irritate the complex into dissonance. Let the commons reek of garlic and burnt spatula, and the AC units stop, drop, or roll midsummer. May the parking space vigilante continue etching cuss words on the doors of random cars to fracture the mask of calm swallowing these dubbed suburban yards, and the phone grinding off and on against your shared wall always expose as myth the notion I have ever been alone. Thanks, everybody.
So when I asked Dennis and Andrew who is going to go first, Andrew said, I'll be his opening act. He's not an opening act, obviously. If you just listen to those poems, he's not an opening act. So thank you, Andrew. That was really wonderful. Andrew does have, I believe, one book back there to sell. Yeah, there was a mishap with getting copies of the book, but I'm sure that if you talk to Andrew, he'll be more than happy to send you a copy, signed, whatever you need. So thank you, Andrew. Now I'm going to be introducing Dennis Hinrichsen. Dennis has read for us a few times, mostly virtually for me. So this is the first time I've actually seen Dennis in the flesh. Yeah. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Dennis. Dennis was born and raised in the Midwest, has lived in Iowa and Illinois numerous times before settling and completing his education in Michigan. Following a 10-year stint working as a technical writer in the Boston area, which sounds not fun, he returned to Michigan and taught writing and lit courses at a local community college. And then this is a really wonderful honor. From May of 2017 to April of 2019, he served as the first poet laureate of the Greater Lansing area. He has 10 full-length collections. Let me repeat that again, 10 full-length collections. And this is his 10th Flesh Plastique, which he's going to be reading from. But he has won numerous prizes, including the 2020 Grid Poetry Prize, the 2015 Rachel Wetzian, I never get that right, Chapbook Prize, and the 2014 Michael Waters Poetry Prize. I could go on, but you want to hear him. You don't want to hear me, really. But let me I love again, I was reading interviews and everything, and it was really cool because Andrew interviewed Dennis, and then Dennis interviewed Andrew for a publication. But I want to talk, this particular quote sort of gives you an idea of Dennis and his way of approaching poetry. So he says, about the time of my sixth book, I started chasing form rather than content, primarily the Shakespearean sonnet, which I played with in long poems in 7-line half-sonnet patterns or in poems where I stacked sonnets. I was also experimenting with punctuation, with integrating more cinematic effects into the poems, more dynamics. I was really trying to teach myself how to write a short poem. That's hard to do. If nobody has written poetry, I mean, I know there are some people out there that have written poetry, but short poems are harder to write, I think, sometimes than long poems. So anyway, and the breakthrough for Dennis was a poem from This Is Where I Live, I Have Nowhere Else to Go, which is, I think, 2 collections ago, where he took a 5-page poem and reduced it to a broken sonnet. That poem basically unlocked Schema Geometrica, which is the book that came before this one. He had a shape that called out to content in a kind of John Cage fashion. So it's a really great, I recommend that an interview. It really explains where how Dennis approaches poetry. But I will say, Dennis's poetry can be challenging sometimes, but also it's emotionally resonant. It's like listening to a record or watching a movie that sort of stretches your understanding of the world and also teaches you something old and new at the same time, something that's true and deep. Please welcome to Peter White Public Library, Dennis Hinrichsen.
Thanks so much. I've had the pleasure of reading via Zoom twice, I think, from Marty, and his introductions are always the best of all wherever we go. They're always so fabulous. So thank you. It's a delight to be here. It's a delight to meet Marty, and it's, again, a delight to read with Andrew. He and I have been on tour, more or less, throughout all of Michigan. We've even been out of the state. I think you've been out of the state. We've been out of the state. So it's fun to be here with him and hear his poetry again. I'm going to read a new poem, and then I'm going to read from Schema Geometrica, a few poems there, and then I'm going to read from the new book, Flesh Plastique. The first poem I'm going to read is called Lyricism Shotgun. Self-Portrait is a painting by William S. Burroughs with Junior Walker and the All-Stars. William S. Burroughs became a painter later in his life and would have a plywood board, paint in front of the board, and then he'd be here with a shotgun, and he'd shoot through the paint cans and paint that way. That's my emotional life, seems like feeling lately with all that's going on in the world. The scene is Rio Town, Lansing. I'm from Lansing. I get trapped by a train, long trains bringing in car parts to the GM plant there that builds Cadillacs and Camaros. So Lyricism Shotgun, Self-Portrait is a painting by William S. Burroughs with Junior Walker and the All-Stars. Graffiti-esque the brain these days. Each moment a train car wreckage of Krylon and illegibility filled with car parts, often chassis and moonroofs, front and back bumpers. I live in a car town, you see. They line up like pretty candy a mile from here. Boutique chocolates of raw American steel mostly, and so much horsepower even R.E. Olds would buckle to his knees. But he's already there. Another drunken conqueror naming shit after himself as the street is named, as this part of town is named, and now this shit is naming me back. I live here. I am birthed daily by its geography. I am tubular and filled with hazardous chemicals, an aerodynamic sculpture of resilient plastic. It is getting into the brains of mice these days, 2 hours after they sip the tainted fluids. Drink deep, my little friends. I'm Stimson, lumber, Procar, Gas X. I'm an Elgin street sweeper's poised monstrosity. The gates are down, a train is blasting through, dainty on my hind wheels like a buffalo. I wish I could control my emotions more, but I can't. They are bullets spraying color everywhere these schoolyard days. The plywood air, the canvas I shotgun this porous body through. And then from Schema Geometrica, I started this book pre-pandemic. I was really interested in my digital self versus my analog self, thinking more globally, trying to connect with everything. And one of the root notes was contagion, and then the pandemic hit, so the book really sort of took off. Thinking of getting viruses, being viral, loving music, good viruses, bad viruses. Music is one of the good viruses in the book, so I want to read one of those poems to start off. Before there was FM, there was AM. and it was all communal at one point, and you had those really wonderful radios with about 5 stations you could listen to, only 2 of which were any good. So this one's called What is the Woolly Bully? I don't know. And Will It Come Again? I liked it better when it was all AM radio and there was wind in my face. Left hand steering, right hand punching chrome keys the size of gumdrops. So I could be this thing for some length of speed in pop song minutes, and then another right turn, no, left, so I had to improvise. It was somebody else's film, a DJ soundtrack. Questions ringing, what is in fact the perfect ratio, time, V, lightning? Did body really sing? Was feedback God? All I had was this 5-banded spectrum, feints and attitudes, a feel for road, engine, and road, curves, dips that were spring-loaded at certain speeds. Oh, perfectly contoured earbuds. Oh, feel of hairs alive with playlists. Where is that neural network now? A body beside me, so it was communal, a testosterone rush, musk, whole flags of it spreading out of the windows because it was summer and we were blasting, open, silk-wormed cities aflame with twilight, lanterning the straightaways. I live in Lansing, in a really nice area, but last 3 or 4 years, hearing a lot of gunshots at night, kind of during the pandemic. And this is kind of one of those poems. There was a gun battle, a guy got shot, and he walked to the hospital. So this poem's called Schema di Contagio Drift, the idea of contagion, drift. I wanted to follow the blood trail and then make a poem out of that. The idea of drift is a psychogeographical idea in which you go into a city and you just get lost in the city. You drift into the city. And then if I think of the poem, if you will, as a little city that I'm building, then I begin to drift associatively through the poem. So it begins with that, me trying to follow the blood trail, and ends up wholly other place. Schema di Contagio, a drift. I fall asleep to fireworks celebrating what I can't say. It is the middle of June. Then wake to gunfire at 5 a.m. The same violence governing one, infecting the other. This is property, mine, don't tread on it. So I keep to the left of the cruisers in taped-off park. The shootouts trace evidence crude, casings and broken glass. The value in it, pride, or just a woman's body, cache of drugs. A neighbor said she heard a female screaming, I've stepped on needles. And so it is morning. A man has carried gut and wound north beneath sodium lighting all the way to Sparrow. Feral cats have tufted a neighbor's yard with blood and fur. These, the flowers that have spawned in the night, the first of summer. Even before I wake, he's gone. Bullet off a rib or just a through and through where no organs are so he can bleed as he walks or walk as he bleeds, leaving me to follow the blood trail. This is where he stumbled maybe to brace himself. Here where he worked the ratios. Steps per drops of blood, river quiet beside him, hospital up ahead in the dark, shining like a yacht, party still raging. Oh, forensics, I am triangulating now the gap between us. A Raven Arms 25 caliber with zombie blood grip. I can imagine this. It's on the list to be destroyed. V-man bleeding, V-man driving away. This bullet walk, a postmodern drift. Fragmentation through my city where real damage occurs. And another city blossoms, blisters, the X-ray. Shard, I'm lost, forgetting, shard. I'm stopping for coffee instead. Or reliving the night I writhed in ER before a hit of morphine and took that sleep. It's strange, but it happens. A baby just drifts into your arms. Your lips attached to its lips, carrying it like that baby seal I saw in Monterey Bay, crying so loud it was trapped in a net, deep water everywhere. The world split open then as the city is now, baby not stirring, its breath not even see-saw, mother racing behind the EMT only partially dressed. She's run out of the house in pajamas, a tattered housecoat. Her husband is followed in the car. And so they just jump the line. They put a fissure in us. They put in wave chop. How far down deep water grows. Never mind the EMT, his next call. Never mind the whales I was in Monterey to see. There is a baby on a gurney in a hallway, barely breathing, and I am breathless with it. And then I'll read the last poem in this book that sets up my beautiful life as a technical writer in the Boston area. This poem mentions Yucca Mountain. I don't know if you remember Yucca Mountain. It was designated to be the permanent storage for high-level civilian nuclear waste. All the nuclear power plants that are still churning away, we're going to put all their fuel rods there in Yucca Mountain, but it was on sacred land, and one of the senators from Utah picked up a big NIMBY, not in my backyard effort, and it's been canceled, and we have nowhere to put it. They're in fact re-racking spent fuel rods, or nuclear fuel rods here in the Michigan, around the Great Lakes, because they're running out of space to put these things. It's going to be an interesting reckoning because we love electricity. I go to get my ecstasy on at Lake Michigan. This is a beautiful ecstasy up here, but I'm a little closer to Lake Michigan. And I go and I buy coffee, and I hear the grinder working, electricity working, and I'm within the exclusion zone of the nuclear power plant down there. So I tried to imagine my cup of coffee, my cappuccino, creating a little tiny piece of nuclear waste that ends up being in the poem a piece of trinitite, which is this really wonderful sort of rock that was put together during that first atomic blast. Sand was lifted up and fused together to create this beautiful green kind of substance. I have one about the size of a teardrop a student gave me. So this is self-portrait with coffee and speed and a nuclear half-life. Saugatuck, DC Cook Nuclear Power Plant. Sometimes I am just a pinch of sand lifted by plutonium, then made molten, a melted green raining down to the desert floor in quartz grains and feldspar, marvelously complex. Yes, Alamogordo, gold. And sometimes I am just sipping coffee in a Saugatuck cafe north of 2 reactors, 1 mile outside the ingestion pathway zone. I've gathered here with others to work the grid, the Wi-Fi's free, and escape the overages, breath and throat and blood and lung, but still I ingest, work a duality. The caffeine half-life I need to power home from a day at the beach versus radioactive churning at Stevensville. All those live rods feeding the rocket apartamento espresso machine so I can get my fix. Oh, Yucca Mountain, I am going home now in the twilight, like you, unblemished, speeding, singing and speeding, Bluetooth on, radio loud, windows wide open. And now for the sexy part of the program, my job as a technical writer in the Boston area. A lot of these poems came out of that. It was a terrible job, but it was really interesting. I was asked at one point with 2 other guys to save the nuclear industry post 3 Mile Island. We were 3 liberal arts majors with pencils and legal pads. The nuclear industry just came to a complete halt. I don't think there's been a new nuclear plant ordered or built since that time, which is interesting. But it was really interesting because you end up writing about waste and all sorts of other kinds of things, and you look at the whole thing, and it opened up my eyes to seeing not only what was there in front of me, but what was not there, where it all came from, and build that into the thinking. This poem's called Iodine. It's kind of a baseball poem, Boston poem. I lived a little within walking distance of Fenway Park. At the time, I was writing an article for John Sununu, then governor of New Hampshire, if you remember John Sununu. There's a junior running around right now somewhere. About, don't worry, if it melts down, we're going to give you iodine tablets to keep your thyroid safe. Meanwhile, don't worry about the plutonium. So this poem's called Iodine, and it's got a wonderful baseball player that I loved going to Fenway and watch pitch, El Tiante, Luis Tiant. He had a really funky kind of wind-up. He'd look to the sky. He'd show his back to the batter. He was fun to watch. So he's in the poem. So Iodine. I dreamed of El Tiante again last night. I don't know why. I saw him pitch many times when I lived in Boston. $2 seats, the bleachers. Fenway, a short walk from where I lived, so I could drink or not drink. Let the drunken crowd evacuate me home. I was an apologist for the nuclear industry then. I wrote things like, in the unlikely event of a nuclear power plant incident, a radioactive iodine release could occur. The solution was potassium iodide to block the uptake of I-131. The thyroid desires it, you see. You sate thyroid. Eliminate the clusters. And so I watched El Tiante pitch just south of the evacuation zone, roared for boomers' taters. You could almost see the blue light of a reactor those cloudless nights. His body like a fuel rod wearing down, best season behind him. He would be a Yankee the following year. That whole back to the batter moved because he dinged a shoulder blade beyond repair, and so the hesitation, the look to the sky, the wicked sidearm to fuck the batter's timing. I hadn't imagined yet making a baby half me inside a woman's body yet. A cellular accident was no real cure, but it was on my mind those Cherenkov nights. The erotic sparking like a proton in a spent fuel pool, a boom beyond the speed of light, but only because I was underwater then. Days lying to jackasses who employed me, nights typewriter ribbon staining my hands with its iodine when I loaded a new roll. This was pre-Chernobyl, pre-Fukushima, so I did not type. Seabrook sits in one of the richest estuaries in the world in New Hampshire's 12-mile coast. It is also on an earthquake fault. Or, in the 1700s, in fact, the earth split open more than once, spitting blue flames and the smell of sulfur. I wrote instead, potassium iodide works best if taken within 3 to 4 hours of an emergency. I didn't say half-life 8 days, as if an accident were a streak of bad weather. I didn't chart the half-life of strontium-90. I rode the Green Line in, scanned box scores, rode the Green Line home. Sometimes I felt it was the earth itself divorcing me, but it was just my first wife, who was in love with a woman then, but kept that core burning hidden. How time melts down to such crystalline fragments, memory's half-life. They are charting cesium in columns of ocean currents off Fukushima now. We made a baby, bought a house across the river. El Tiante, retired by then. When her ankles swelled, we drove north into the evacuation zone and waded hand in hand the cooling waters. But the baby sucked up life, was born. I held her, radioactive in my arms, kissed her forehead clean in such small, cooing doses. It was an iodine I thought would sate and then protect her. Well, we grew up poor. I grew up poor. My parents were pretty poor, so 2 lawn chairs, a concrete slab back of the house, and Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass on the stereo playing really loud created a kind of Vegas for them, summer nights. So this poem's called Waiting for the End of the World with Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass. There's a couple of references in there. I put everything in the poem that makes sense to me. There's a phrase on the beach. There was a movie and a book and a movie on the beach that dealt with nuclear holocaust back in the day. Some of you guys might remember that. And then there's a turning in the poem that mimics the turning at the end of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Waiting for the End of the World with Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass. If martini, then Tijuana night. My parents on the concrete slab back of the house in lawn chairs, cigarettes and sweating drinks, the nightclub pose. Prelude maybe, foreplay. Herb Albert blasting from the cabinet stereo, songs about food, really sex. That's what the whipped cream is saying. Dinner not ready yet, but they are richer for their love. I cannot deny them this. It is the end of their world I am surviving. Rations, grilled cheese and tomato soup, crackers, anything frozen, canned. I am dark under the eyes. I am orphaned with new sounds. On the beach, wandering wastelands to come. World in runaway, gas already 30 cents and rising, brave new signage pointing north and south and north again, its perfect decimal of misperception, better drugs, later, more efficient lies. The only bed I made that night was hunger, oven still cold, as mother bled her Revlon, nursing drinks, then caressed my father's arm. I had an uncle who was born in 1942 with craniosynostosis. That front part of the skull didn't open up. So, World War II was going on. There wasn't much hope for him. They gave him a short lifespan. My grandparents actually gave him up to the state of Iowa to raise. Thought he would die at some point. Anyway, he lived till he was 79. And had this amazing life, and he was in my life all the time. He's my Uncle Larry. I loved him to death. And then he died, and then I wasn't part of the discussion, but my family just threw him in the ground. No ceremony, no obituary, no nothing. You can't find him anywhere on that digital heaven we all inhabit. And so I wanted to write that and honor him by writing some poems and trying to get him published online so you could Google him and find him, and he's in that same heaven. So I want to read a couple of poems, because I love him, and he was a funny guy. He had a pet turtle named Larry Jr. Elegy for my uncle with dime store turtle and a scrawl of desire. My uncle had a dime store turtle, and he named Junior for a while. This was when he was older and better and could share a room, but he still worried, so the turtle guarded his radio when he was gone. At least that's what he told me, but in the end, the turtle didn't do nothing. Just crawled up a little ramp in and out of the water, ate lettuce, while my uncle folded napkins and rode the bus, proud to be in America with a job and a paycheck. The tuberculosis would come later, after the rape, after the MRSA. I don't think he ever had a phone or computer. He wrote me letters once with a boyish scrawl saying, "Please come and get me. I want the car, the house, the wife." Same crimp. Scrawl of desire is in the helix that encodes me. I feared it when I had a daughter, but she's okay, and I'm okay. And it's just that an AI is stroking us to death in this primal world. I'm glad he never knew that. He had a job, and that was good, and then retired, coming home to his part of a state-funded room, turtle guarding his stuff. And then elegy for my uncle, or oubliette craniosynostosis. This idea, oubliette is just a hole in the ground. The only way out is through the roof. And that felt like his body, his brain, the lid was on his body. Elegy for my uncle, or oubliette craniosynostosis, for Larry Ray Van Horn, 1942 to 2021. Analog life, unembalmed life. You are gone now without ceremony on a Tuesday. No sweet medicine for the skin but sky and a backhoe. 2 quick spits for the straps when they lowered you in. Still man-child in your mama's arms, they are stacking bodies now to conserve space. A prison or spent fuel pool compression. Your brain still crushed by the power of bone. How could it not? No God at the top of those stairs. No elasticity for continental drift. That cranial suture closed. I was a boy. I led you to the movies as if on a leash. Dearest uncle, lover of cars, remembrancer of homes, postcards addressed to our normality. House on a pole because your papa loved purple martins. I never saw you rage, but I saw your stubbornness once before a scoop of cottage cheese. You would not eat it. The nurse could not make you eat it. I loved you more. You were contagion. Sun around which my genome spun. Precious metal returned to ground. and then 2 short poems to end. I saw a photograph of thousands and thousands and thousands of dead flamingos in a Turkish dry lake bed that broke my heart. Right before the pandemic, I was at Jacksonville Zoo. Behind the scenes, my niece is a keeper there, and we were able to feed a bunch of animals. And one of them were these beautiful baby flamingos who'd been hand raised, so they weren't fearful of all of us, and they just came in and we fed them. So this initiated that response, I guess. The poem's called Despair in Open D. I wanted to pretend like I'm in a different guitar tuning, right? With Gerard Manley Hopkins on tom-toms, sprung rhythm, and a dead flamingo. Even in death its body's taut, a drum skin drumming drought, drumming salt plain irrigation murdered. Now by the drone thousands, soft carrion mounds, unflacked and untwisted, devouring eyes, thirst all in a world of wet, a last brief fury. I fed them elsewhere once. I was krill on human knees, part of that mothering bosom flock, by 6 or 7 flaminglets feasted upon. Grain of my body wrestled down by feathered living tom-toms, beaks just beginning to curve, legs pinken. And now one of them has siphoned a fleck of krill from snarling forearm hair. Another is full face down in the hand, filtering open water for frantic remnants shed. Oh, world sorrow, world woed bird, the taste you taste is me. And then I'll close with this poem, if I can find it. This poem mentions Anish Kapoor, who's an artist. He did the Chrome Bean in Chicago, if you've seen pictures of that. He also had the exclusive rights to the Blackest of Black paints, Vanta Black. If you were an artist and you used it, he would sue you. It absorbs 99.56% of the light that it hits because it's got these fingers, and light goes in and then it's refracted out. I think there's a blacker black actually, because all the other artists were really mad at him. So this is called Not Fade Away, Buddy Holly's song, or Self-Portrait in Vanta Black with Anish Kapoor. I think it's speaking to what Andrew spoke to, poetry bringing people together, and there's hope in it. I hope. I'm singing because I'm happy. Buddy Holly's Not Fade Away. There is, I think, still time for this. He's alive because I'm alive. Chorus cutting now across the top of a column of wind. This is how the dead infect, how decay calls out to us. It cannot be otherwise. Tube of plain, that singularity, still churning Iowa skies, wind and flurries, ground as yet unplowed by dying, big bopper Valens, not yet fearful beside him, the sounds, not songs in their heads, still clear, crackling radio. It's an abyss I might paint now in Vanta Black, risking litigation from Anish Kapoor. He alone owns the rights to fashion such an image from which nearly zero light escapes. But the abyss is always leaking. Some nights I am so robed in it, I am substrate, afraid of heartache coming, but welcoming it. Sweet, wide, beautiful, blistering, burning world entrapped, deflected, released as heat, until I am skin to skin a membrane, heart, bop, 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 alive. Amen. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you all for coming. If you like what you heard, there are books back there for sale. Even if you didn't like what you heard, go back and buy a book. Come on, they came to the UP for us. So please come back. We have lots of great stuff coming up, especially on Monday for Alex Gino. That's going to be a really, really exciting time. But let's give Andrew and Dennis another big hand. Thank them for coming. Thank you. You have half an hour before the library closes. I have to do that because they start making these announcements and they get really nasty. So, yeah, please hang around, talk to Dennis and Andrew, and get some books. And thank you for coming.